Well, joining me now in a CNBC exclusive interview, L3Harris CFO Ken Bedingfield. L3 hitting an all-time high today as well after announcing a deal to sell a majority stake in its space propulsion and power business to private equity firm AE Industrial to become a standalone company, revitalizing the Rocketdyne name. And L3Harris also announcing a reorganization of its business units today. A lot to get to, Ken. It's great to have you back on the show, so welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Morgan.
All right, let's start right there with this deal news, because we're talking about an enterprise value of what, $845 million, standalone company. Transaction expected to happen in the second half of the year. 40% stake being retained by L3Harris. As far as I know, at least in this industry, we haven't seen a deal quite like this done before. So how did it come about, and why is it happening now?
Well, look, Morgan, I think as we look at our strategy to be the trusted disruptor in defense, creative partnerships have been a part of that strategy, and I think that's what you're seeing here. We have a lot of confidence in this business, and we were looking for a partner that we could work with who could invest to drive the growth in the space propulsion business, while we would be able to, continue with our knitting, which is really more so focused on national security, and we can take some of the cash and invest into the missiles business to really drive the capacity that's needed for the Department of War and its allies to expand missile production.
Yeah, and of course, missile production is something that's been talked about and has been a focus of the Department of War for years now, including solid rocket motors, which I know you're in the business of making too. So what does this mean in terms of an ability to reinvest back into that production and ramp it more quickly?
Well, we're absolutely focused on ramping missile production, in particular our portion of missiles, largely solid rocket motors, but other electronics as well. We've been working very closely with the other defense primes, as well as the Department of War, to identify the critical programs that need to get accelerated and ensure that we are doing what we can to drive that acceleration as quickly as possible. So we'll be investing in, new equipment, automation, building factories, to drive growth into that, needed expansion. And I think this really will help us to jumpstart and enable that growth.
Yeah, I was talking to Kurt Conert from AE Industrial, who's on the other side of this deal this morning, and he basically said he thinks deconsolidation is coming to the industry. He sees this as potentially the first wave of this type of transaction for primes as this disruption happens in the government, as we see these policy shifts. How does this speak to the broader industry landscape, and especially as we do see defense budgets growing, but we also see priorities changing?
Look, I think it does help to create competition in defense. So if you think about it, AE Industrial will be able to invest in growing this business in space propulsion. We'll be able to take our proceeds and invest more money into the business of capacity expansion on missiles, as I mentioned. So I think it's, a win-win for all customers, and certainly does kind of open that door to creating additional competition in aerospace and defense markets.
I would assume L3Harris Technology was involved in this highly sophisticated, one for the history books mission that we saw carried out over the weekend. What should investors understand about the role of L3Harris in that and in this military complex in general?
Well, first of all, I would say, look, L3Harris supports our customer, our biggest customer, obviously being the U.S. warfighter, in whatever their mission might be, whether that's in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, or a potential adversary in China, and certainly any issues here in the Western Hemisphere. It's safe to assume that L3 products and technologies were involved, whether at the platform level or at the soldier level, as they executed the mission. And we're certainly proud to support our customers in whatever missions they have, whatever challenges they're dealing with in this continuing, complex geopolitical environment.
Yeah, and just your assessment of the geopolitical environment and what it means as we do see defense budgets continue to grow, and how that, I guess, comes back to L3Harris and this demand profile.
Yeah, look, if you think about, U.S. defense budgets, certainly, there's a $150+ billion relative to, as we look at the budgets going forward, whether it's to fund Golden Dome or other opportunities. We see that as driving, significant ability for us to grow the business, whether it's at the space level with missile defense, or ultimately missile capacity to drive interceptors that are needed to protect the homeland, and then supporting our allies who are seeing growing defense budgets as well. We've seen a lot of growth, certainly in Europe, as we bring, advanced software-defined radios.
Yeah.
Lessons learned out of the Ukraine, war, and how soldiers fight on the battlefield.
Okay.
They want the most advanced technology, and that's what we bring.
Ken Bedingfield, great to have you on, CFO of L3Harris. Appreciate it.
Thank you.